Hello and welcome back to Yakhi Play, the show where two Lebanese guys who live in Dubai talk about board games for no reason whatsoever.
No reason whatsoever. Jad, I'm doing it for the internet fame and the karma and the Reddit points.
And the brownie points.
Brownie points? I'm thinking more Reddit, but whatever. Jad Yamin, Sunny Fakhouri. Hey, how's it going? What are we talking about today, Jad?
We have brought you a game which you might know, which we're going to talk about the strategy aspect of a little bit more than which is what we've been doing in our videos here, and we're talking about Energy Empire, or as the locals like to call it,
Energy Empire.
Empire. Yes.
Empire. Very pronunciation, very important in this game. I like this game because not sure if you guys have played Manhattan Project, the predecessor of this game, but for me, I love worker placement games, and I know you don't like worker placement games, but this game does a great job of launching you into your engine very, very quickly. Whereas other games like Terra Mystica maybe take more time and it starts off really, really slow, and then towards the end you basically accelerate into a awesome point scoring system. Here you can get buildings early on that can get you lots of resources, and it feels like your turns can go really, really fast. That's sort of why I like this game. It's really good.
For me, this game does a great job of fixing many of the things I hate about worker placement games. First of all, the locations are not prohibitive. Somebody went to the place, sure, I'll spend an energy, I'll go there as well. Second of all, you are not being guided to what you want to do. You can basically choose whatever strategy you want. You don't have an objective like in Lords of Waterdeep or It's like you have to have these resources and spend them on this quest. Otherwise, you don't have anything else to do.
Right.
I can launch myself in any endeavor I want on the board and it will reward me. And it has a built-in catch-up mechanic, which is not artificial, in the environment of the game. So if you're playing with younger players, or let's say newer players, not necessarily, they don't have to be young. So, and they really don't know what to do, they're being kind of slow. Hey, guess what? The Global Impact card, they have a clean environment probably because they've not done
As much.
Yeah. They're gonna get 5 points probably.
Probably, yeah.
Unless they've really made horrible decisions. And what I also love, absolutely love about this game, and other publishers should learn, component quality, people. GMT Games, I'm talking to you.
Jad, do you want some steel?
Yes.
Here's some steel.
Amazing.
It's an actual steel. It's like the typical cartoon.
It's wood, and this is made of plastic.
I know it's made of wood, but it looks like an actual steel piece. It's really cool. And science. Well, that's maybe one exception, but
it's an atom. It is an atom.
It is an atom, right? I'm thinking it's like a schematic, and it's like a flat thing. So
So,
let's get to the game. So
let's get to the game.
How do you win a game of Energy Empires?
Well, basically, this qualifies as a typical point salad, if you want. But what's the nice thing about it is that when you're explaining the game, you don't have to say, "Oh, it's a point salad game. You just have to go places and get points." No, you are trying to develop your country and do as many projects as possible while trying to keep your environment clean, and that will appeal to the hippie inside of all of us.
Right. There's a couple of scoring categories in the game, and doing well in many of them will basically lead you to victory. The most obvious one when you look at the board when you start is the United Nations track down here. This is a way of converting some resources that your country starts with into more points, so that's something you could maybe fight for. You can also pick up buildings. Buildings are a huge way to earn points in these games, and they're basically listed at the top left of the card. Most buildings range from being 2 points to 5 points, so depending on the building.
Are there 2-point buildings?
There are actually 2-point buildings, yes.
Really?
I think so. If you dig through the deck, you can probably find some, but they do exist. I'm pretty sure about it. They're also typically some of the more powerful buildings, although not the most powerful building, as we will talk about in a bit. Today I learned. You can also get points for your environment.
Yeah.
And so if you look at your environment board at the very end of the game, if you have absolutely no pollution, you can make a total of 15 plus 6 for a grand total of 21 points.
Yeah.
If you play your cards right.
Yeah.
Or go to clean the log. But the environment is kind of not just end game points, it's also mid game points. Because as you play the game, you'll be drawing these Global Impact cards. And if you have a nice clean environment, you could earn a whopping 30 points from that as well. 5 for each card.
5 for each card you draw, yes.
30 in total, right?
Yeah.
So lots of points to be had there as well.
Yeah.
There's a few other ways to get points as well.
Your dice, your
yeah.
achievements, these are some things that you're going to pick up along the way.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to go into the game knowing which achievements you're going to get or knowing which dice you're going to get. unless you're France. But they will give you those bonus points that you just might need to win the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, as I had said at the start of that, you want to focus on as many categories as you can, but don't be afraid to neglect one of them if you feel you can really push yourself up in others. Yeah. And the most common example of that is the UN track. Yeah. It's hard to have to commit these resources every single turn. If you can, great. That's a great scoring mechanism. But sometimes you need to focus on getting more buildings or cleaning up your environment for a particular global impact card that you saw. So don't be afraid to be flexible as well.
I mean, for the UN track in particular, I take the resources that your starting nation will have and try to make a ratio out of it. So let's take, for example, a nation like Japan, for example, here, who requires 2 money and a plastic to advance on the UN track once for 4 points, basically. If you spend those same resources in the commerce market, you can at least get 6 points, if not more. So that the same applies for most of the industrialized nations. The only nations which this does not apply for are the oil-rich nations. Because typically, in the way that you're gathering the resources in this game, 1 barrel of oil consists basically, it's 1/3 of a resource, if you wish. It's not a full resource, because most actions will give you 3, you sell 3, you buy 3, you drill for 3.
And early on you can pay a buck to get
pay
3
a buck
for the
to
trade
get 3.
space, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So maybe if you got an oil-rich nation, yes, it might be a more viable strategy, in my opinion. If you have one of the other ones, you don't want to go for the UN track unless you have a lot of leftover resources by turn 3 or 4, after having generated 3 or 4 times what I'm trying to say, because there are no turns in this game.
Right. Yeah. Key point about the oil nations. So most nations that start with oil will also feature oil as being part of their UN power.
Yeah.
And early on, you will be tempted. Most of the oil countries also don't have dice. So early on, you might neglect picking up a die and say, you know what, I think I can just go a bit further without a die. Yeah. Let me just burn some oil. Yeah. And that really competes with using the UN power and keeping your nation working with energy. So I've noticed I've had problems with that sometimes with some of the oil nations, especially Iraq. Which
yeah, definitely. I mean, if that space is empty, if the dice space, the power plant, if you can go there, even if you have to spend 1 energy, go there. Pick up that blue die. You can usually very easily pick up a steal either in the mine or in many of these cards. Right. A lot of the cards in the industry market are gonna give you a steal. Pick up the blue dice, even if you have to spend an energy as well. And then if you want to burn some extra oil to get more dice, fine, but then you at least have a chance of not polluting. Right. So I think the blue dice is a must-have for every single player. I mean, and there's a reason why it's a maximum of 1, because it's that good. It's
a great early investment, and honestly, with a single steal, you can either get a blue die, which is a hydro die, or a coal die, which is the black die. Yeah. They both have the exact same output. Yeah. Right. Why would you?
Except for the pollution.
So, you're playing Energy Empire for the first, maybe second, maybe third time, and what is your opening decision? It's always going to be picking 1 of 2 countries and 1 of 2 achievements. Yeah. So let's talk about the countries. So if you evaluate the starting resources of each of these countries, you can kind of get a sense of how many actions you would have to take to get those resources. So for example, let's compare China and Iraq. Right? So China, they start with a plastic, which is basically an action somewhere on the board. Yeah. They start with a steel, which is basically an action over here. Yeah. And then a worker, which is effectively 3 money, an action, and a pollution saved to get that, right? Quite a lot of things. Iraq is 4 money, which is basically finance, and 4 barrels of oil, which is basically another action plus another third. And
a third of an action.
That's it.
It's really bad.
It's, I will tell you, Iraq is probably one of the most flexible of the countries because of all the extra starting money they get. They can basically jump into any building they want early on. That's an advantage.
That's given that you get the building that you want, at least cheap enough. Because if you're going to spend all 4 on 1 building, it's not really worth it.
Yeah, it usually isn't. And if you look at the dice nations, well, that's even more saving because dice are just really important in this game. If you don't have dice, you're basically supplementing your strategy with oil, right? And that's something that say Iraq would probably do early on because all they have is oil.
No, here's a question.
Yep.
Would these dice be dice that you would go for normally in the game had they not come in your opening hand? At least for your first die.
Right. So
would you go for a nuclear or a coal as your first die? I think never.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Nuclear maybe. If I have the nuclear make points for having nuclear tokens on your board, and I
actually have the achievements for it, yeah.
Yeah, but otherwise no. I usually start with Hydro because Hydro is just one of the best dice in the game, and then either pick up nuclear or coal, or focus on solar wind. Yeah. So yeah, interesting point. No, you wouldn't necessarily pick those dice up, but having it is a huge advantage because it basically means you can forego having to pick up oil and you can focus more on developing your empire and getting points for buildings and things like that. All of these countries in this sort of column here just have lots of resources, and they're quite flexible. Although some less than others. Like Great Britain here can either pick up any of the 2-cost buildings, or they can go primarily for industrial buildings, and they want to because they want steel to power their.
Technically, if you want to go for the lowest possible cost, Great Britain can pick up 3 buildings. The US can pick up 2.
Right.
Canada can pick up 3.
Yep.
Japan can pick up 3
as well. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
West Germany 2. France 2. Soviet Union 1.
Right.
Iraq 2. China 2.
Right. And India
1.
Right.
Yeah. But they get the extra worker, which is again
pretty huge.
A lot of actions saved and a lot of resources saved.
Now, I do want to make a point about the idea of going slow versus going fast. So you're probably, most games that you play like this, you think, oh, I need to use every single worker like to the full effect and only generate when I have spent everything. Right? Now early on you certainly want to do that because you shouldn't be thinking about achievements early on. You should be focusing on building up
because you don't know if you're gonna go for that stuff. You don't know if that particular achievement is gonna be viable for you or not.
Exactly.
It's way too early to find out.
It's too early to do that. But in this game, it does reward you for generating at key points and for actually having excess things, at least 2, to pick up another achievement. So early on you won't be doing that, but later on you certainly want to, focus on that. Having the extra worker is nice, but I wouldn't say it's like game breaking. It certainly.
It doesn't give. I found that I've done very well in games where I've played with China and India, just because of the extra worker. You can pick up that maybe 1 extra building. You can, or if you want to do something which would require more moves, so like get a steel to then get the dice or build that combo up. That extra worker gives you that flexibility.
Right. I've just found that these nations are so bereft of resources. I would typically only pick them if I was further down in the turn order, because that extra starting money is a huge deal for actually being able to pay the resources to buy a building you want, and then sort of jumping from there. And even though you're going maybe last or second last, that extra oomph of not having to spend an action going to finance to give everyone else some money is huge. It's huge, absolutely huge. Yep.
Yeah.
So, in our humble opinion, only pick Iraq if there is a power building that you really want to see, or if you want to pretend to be Saddam Hussein. That's really sort of how I would see that. Another thing to think about the nations as well is how their UN powers work. You should be looking at buildings that can help you power that, right? Yeah. Because, for example, if you're playing as Great Britain, you're not going to take 2 actions to get a steel and get 2 money and then spend a worker there. You're going to find a building that can basically do that for you, right? And you should be thinking about that for all of the other countries as well. Do I have buildings that can satisfy that? If I do, and if they're visible, and if I think you can get them first, totally go for that. Yeah. If you can't, be a bit more hesitant in picking that nation up. As to the achievement that comes with it, it's not as critical a decision, but you should certainly pick something that focuses on the strength of that nation.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Great Britain, steel, they want to go down the industry route. So if you find, like, this achievement that happens to be here, well, wonderful. You should probably pick Great Britain. That's a great combination. If you have one that rewards you for having science tokens, though, maybe you don't want to pick a nation that requires science for
exactly
for the
because you're gonna be spending those resources to advance, and you're gonna be scarce for them, so you wanna go for something else. Probably.
Right. So, those are like general thoughts as to sort of how you pick your starting nation and this starting achievement as well.
Yeah. Something we've noticed about building is that off the bat, they almost on average all give you 3 or 4 victory points, because they're either 2 or 3 and they're clean, or they're 4 or 5 and they generate pollution, and if it's 5, it's a nuclear pollution. And essentially, to clean up that pollution, it's an action and half a resource in the case of regular pollution, and it's the full resource of science token in the case of a nuclear. It's a decision that you have to take whether or not you're gonna be polluting and cleaning up. And if you're doing that, it's very important that you are checking your global impact cards in a systematic way to know where you're headed. And it's very important also to remember that you can check any card. So in case you know that you can't do anything about the very next card, because I don't know, I just happen to pollute my whatever and I can't react fast enough, right, you can prepare yourself for the one after that. So this is very important to remember to, when you're playing the game, lay these cards out when you make your deck in a way that is easily accessible for everyone, to make sure that all the players remember that they can check any card they want and not just the very next card.
Yeah. Now, usually when you have the chance to check a card, you will of course check the next card,
one,
right? Because it tells you about what buildings will get shuffled, what you'll be scoring, and what event might happen.
Yeah.
But
just in the off case that where you're this far down in the pile and you have that pollution here, there, you really can't do anything right now. If somebody's already on the cleanup, if you don't have that, but you can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
All you can do is check the next one and make sure you're preparing yourself for that.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so buildings are good for points.
Mm-hmm.
They're also good for sort of accelerating your empire in terms of generating resources.
Yeah.
But some buildings are better than others. And these 5 buildings I'm going to show, 6 buildings I'm going to show you, are buildings you should watch out for. In the government section, it is the national park. This one gives you money for every clean forest on your board. At the start of the game, you have nothing but clean forests. This is 5 money for 2 workers. That is insane. This can basically fund building sprees, worker sprees, trading sprees. Absolutely humongous. And yes, it does cost 2 workers to activate, but
Or 2 energy.
Or 2 energy, right? Or any combination of that. But it is huge. I have won games just picking this up and just going to town and activating every single turn and basically getting like 40 money or 35 money by the end of the game. And,
these cards which require the two placements might seem a little bit like, do I really want to be invested in this at the start of the game, because you just basically start with your 3 workers and your 2 energy. But keep in mind, you're gonna be picking up dice very fast. And there will be turns where you're going to be having 6, 7, 8 energy. So think about that. Do you want to scatter those around on lesser cards, which can give you 1 or 2 resources, or do you want to commit them to cards which basically will shift the momentum in your favor?
Right.
Yeah.
And if you think very carefully about using this card, if you have a clean forest, you're basically spending a worker or an energy to get 2.5 money. If you compare it to something like finance, which just gives you 2 money, or 4 if you feel like sharing, which is not really good. Far better. Far better. This is the forest version. In the commerce market, there are the other 2 versions for the clean water and the clean sky, and they're basically these guys here. They both give you 3 points, and they're very similar. This is a money for each clean ocean, and this is a money for each clean air. This is obviously better than this because you actually start with evolution in the air at the start of the game. But
this has the added bonus of having a sexy lady with legs, with pretty legs.
Can't forget about that, of course. These same argument here. These are both very, very powerful cards, and I would recommend picking those up if you see them early on, ASAP, because they can really, really just launch you into buying everything and winning the game that way.
Obviously, to complement this strategy of whatever card you have, you're probably going to want to keep that part of the environment clean, by default.
Makes sense. So you wouldn't want to buy buildings that pollute that area, or if you do, you want to make sure that
you clean it up very fast. Yeah.
Now, a natural advantage, I would say this is a bit better at achieving that goal than these two, because green cards naturally help you clean up the environment.
Yeah.
So if you do eventually pick up a pollution in the forest, like for example with the hydro dye, you will probably have some cards in the deck.
There's so many
which
of them.
Can basically help you clean up.
So many of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're all mostly here.
A couple of other key buildings. Oil broker. Really, really powerful early on. Absolutely powerful. You come here, you buy this, you give $1 away, and you get 3 barrels of oil. And the next time you generate, most likely it's still 1, you do it again. This can basically fund your energy needs for a very long time.
Yeah.
It pollutes because you're basically burning oil, but that's totally fine.
Yeah, if you happen to pick up a blue dye along the way,
Yeah.
no, yeah, you don't need it.
This card would be the reason why I pick Iraq. If I am going first, and this is an option, this would be the reason why I pick Iraq, because this could basically fund your UN power, and it can also fund your energy needs for quite a long time.
That's true.
Oil broker is a very, very good card. And later on, if you are rich in oil, you could always choose to sell it for money, but that's not really great. I've always found myself buying oil at 1 early on, but I've never found myself drilling and then selling it back. Gas station. Not a great early card, for obvious reasons, because the price of oil is very cheap. But if this comes up later on in the game, pick it up, because it's basically going to give you as much money as these guys, and that can help fund a couple more buildings toward the end.
Yeah.
This is the least powerful of the buildings I'm going to mention, but it's something to keep an eye out for. Even when it gets to 3, it's pretty good. Spend a worker for $3, not bad, not bad, not bad. Last card, energy company. This basically, for 2 workers, lets you either drill for oil, or, more important, get an energy dye.
Yeah.
Huge.
And on turns where you're gonna have global impact card, we say it requires 1 more energy to go to any spot where anybody else is. That's at least 1 energy saved by going on this card and going anywhere else, and you can just basically pick up 2 dice in each of your turns. One time by going here, one time by going there, and you can fill up on dice really quickly and
Absolutely.
have a lot of energy to power your engine.
Absolutely. So all of these cards that I've mentioned are basically foundations for a good engine.
Yeah.
They basically either give you lots of money to give you flexibility to buy other better cards, or they help you deal with your energy problems. And
I think another group of cards, which you already mentioned, I think, which is the ones that do cleanups. I think that you can't have too many of those. I mean, more often than not, as soon as those come out, you have people rushing for them. As soon as they pop out,
picking them up. Yeah.
somebody's gonna pick them up. You do need those because the cleanup space is gonna get very, very crowded.
All cards certainly are good as well. Like some of them do give resources, and you certainly need those to.
It's a very balanced.
Yeah.
They are very balanced decks.
But these buildings I've shifted down here, as we had said, if you see them, they're
Pick them up.
important.
Pick them
Either make sure you take them, or ensure other people can take them. Right?
Yeah.
Variety is not good, and what I mean by that is you should not get green and brown and yellow buildings. You should try to make it a point to focus on maybe 2 categories at most, like green and yellow, or green and brown, or whatever. And the reason why is being able to take an action of putting a dude in an area and then activating all your buildings is really powerful.
Yeah.
It means you go fast, which basically means you get the lion's share of generations, and which is also bad for pollution, by the way. But it basically sort of shortens the game in your favor, because if you're buying buildings, you're probably doing well. Also, basically opens up a lot of flexibility as well, because if you have a lot of buildings that can give you different resources, you can be selective in what you activate. You don't have to activate everything every single time you place a green die. You can be like, okay, this turn I need to activate this to pick up another green die, so maybe I'll just put 2 guys there. Maybe I don't need 5 money. That can sometimes happen.
Being said, if you do pick up cards from all 3 markets, it's not necessarily a bad thing,
Right.
because sometimes you will then have the flexibility of going anywhere you want on the board,
Right.
and then having auxiliary actions to do so. It's a good strategy as well. Maybe not as maybe it has a cap which is lower than specializing in 1 or 2,
Right.
and I agree with that, but it is still a viable strategy, especially maybe in a 5-player game.
I will make a special point to the brown sector. You will at least like 2 or 3 times in the game come to the power plant space to get another die. Wouldn't it be great if you had a brown card to also power as well?
Always get brown cards.
If you can find a card that gives you steel, it's basically a self-fulfilling prophecy. Go over here, buy a blue or a black die, and then put a worker there to get the steel back, which will then be used to pay for the next thing. So even if you're not an industrial nation, like if you don't have steel driving your country or a lot of money, picking up a card that gives you steel when you go here is great because it basically gives you points and energy and takes care of all that stuff as well.
Definitely.
Many of the green cards in the game, many of the green early game global impact cards are...
They're supposed to be good.
They're supposed to be good,
yeah.
And they basically are like feel good. Oh, everyone gets a bit of everything. You can get $2 in trade, or ooh, resources everywhere. Woo! And it's like a party time.
Party time.
There is a key point for the green cards, and that is you do not want to be the guy triggering it on your turn.
Yeah.
And by that I mean you don't want to be the guy generating or finishing your turn buying a building, which causes pollution to then basically cause.
Oh, because. Immediately in turn order, starting with the active player. Each player may drill as if using the oil drilling board.
Yeah,
What's the implication of that?
That's actually an example where it doesn't quite matter as much, but here
another one.
That's also not one. Here we go. So they're basically there's I didn't order this, by the way.
Okay.
There's three. It's basically these three over here. So yes, planning for 3 not great, but it is. I think there's 8 cards in total, so there's a 3/8 chance, like a bit less than 50%. So these cards basically place resources in their area. So basically, this puts science resources here, this puts steel resources here, and this puts plastic resources here. And if you are the one to have just generated, you are not going to be the guy picking up these resources. You're going to be missing
out on those.
So. If you have a decision to make about generating right now and causing pollution, or maybe waiting another turn, maybe taking a less optimal action, it could be a good choice to wait a little bit and have somebody else trigger that.
It's not game breaking.
It's not game breaking, but it's something to keep in mind. And especially if these cards are coming up because you've seen the card, then certainly that would be an advantage there.
Yeah.
The red cards, much less so, because the red cards basically screw everyone over, and whether you're screwed first or last doesn't really matter. You're getting screwed either way.
Orally. Scientific research is going to be a very key space throughout the game. It's going to be a crowded space.
It's very important if you're focusing on keeping a clean environment, because a byproduct of that is getting close to 30 points from the global impact cards. So you need to sort of keep an eye out for what scoring category is coming up next, so that you can do well.
Exactly. That being said, there are cards which are going to come up which do the same thing, and it's usually better if you have one, because then you don't have to compete for that space. Education, I think, it's a space which is constantly covered throughout the game, but it's a space that people will wait for. So like, okay, you went there, okay, I'll wait next turn, I'll try to get a worker, or maybe I'll wait for one of these cards to get a worker, or something like that.
The government cards that give you extra workers are nice, even though they're a bit more expensive. They don't give pollution, which is a nice touch. And even if you max out your workers, you can still get some benefit. Like work corps, I just love. It's just you clean up or get a worker. Those are 2 great things. I love that.
Yes.
Although it does cause pollution, but
this space you're going to be fighting for throughout the game, I think, especially in the late game. This definitely.
Spend the resources to get 2, maybe more points. I like it. Looks good.
Exactly. The mine. It's not that great of a space.
There are so many brown cards.
That give steel. So unless you really need a steel, nobody's going to go for that. We already talked about oil drilling. Chemistry is going to be a space which is going to be sought after by the oil drilling nations, because it's just such a good way of generating
other resources
from that.
But I've never actually used that space.
I've used it a lot.
You've used it a lot? Interesting. I just feel like...
Okay, so think about it. You're converting 1/3 of a resource into 3 resources.
That is pretty good.
You're tripling the amount of resources you're getting.
But the problem is that it's very focused. Like if you're coming to this space, which is a brown space, you're probably focusing on brown buildings, right? Maybe, possibly, I don't know.
Possibly.
This basically helps you buy more yellow buildings and blue buildings.
Sure.
Which is not brown.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you're not doing the bam, 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 put all my energy down on all of these cards thing, but if you're doing this early in the game, you can allow yourself to do that, and then you start picking up the yellow cards, and it's not such a straightforward strategy like the other ones, but it's still, I've used the space maybe if I had like all rich nations like Iraq, I've used it maybe at least 3 or 4 times throughout the game.
Interesting. Okay. Maybe I'm just so pollution averse that. Yeah, interesting. The power plant space, probably the most important space on the board.
Definitely.
Just because dice, you need dice to power your empire.
Everything.
And honestly, like, energy is such an important part of this game, not because it powers your buildings. That's really mostly what it does, but also because having lots of energy is never a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because even if you have leftover energy, you get an achievement.
Yeah.
That's good. So
Exactly.
you shouldn't be too worried about getting too many dice and be like, I don't have enough buildings. It's fine. Just get more dice. You'll get more energy. You get more achievements. Totally fine. Or worst comes to worst, you use that extra energy to go to spaces that you really, really want to, but you can't because other people are blocking you.
Or just be an asshole and just put the energy down when you don't have to, and they make the space inaccessible for everybody else.
What? Are you talking about the rule that lets you put more energy than you have to go onto a space to basically deny people?
Exactly.
What? Great game-ending move, by the way.
Yeah.
If you know the game's gonna end, and you have your last action, you have a whole bunch of energy, and you know you're not gonna generate, just put all your energy on one space and be like, ha ha! Just try and
Right
get
here.
past my 4 stacks of energy.
Right.
As to the dice, we've already said that hydro and coal are the same. They give you the exact same output for the same thing. Hydro only pollutes once.
Coal pollutes every single time.
Yeah. Hydro is good. Hydro is great. You can only get one, whack, but...
Oh, you only need one. You basically, it's when you're, so there's 2 ways of going about dice. Either you go all clean, you definitely don't want to go all polluting. You want to have at least 1 clean die in there, or a couple of clean dice, to basically try to, you're gambling basically.
Right.
It's a luck, it's a roll of a die. Hey, if my clean die are higher than my polluting die, I don't get anything.
That's right.
So it's a fun little variant in the game where it's not necessarily the person with the most solid strategy right off the bat, the most hero player that's gonna dominate the board. So it's a nice little thing.
And something I've noticed is that countries that focus on brown, which are typically countries that have lots of steel because they can buy steel balloons with that, will typically focus on getting hydro, geo, and coal, and maybe the odd nuclear. But the other nations who don't have steel will focus primarily on solar wind, or maybe even a nuclear or 2, and of course the 1 hydro. You should always try to get that 1 hydro as soon as you can. There is something to be said about how weak the solar wind die is in terms of energy. Basically, it is a single energy, maybe 2 if you get lucky. Not a lot. It's pretty low.
Yeah.
Whereas nuclear is amazing. It's 3 energy, 2 if you screw it up, but that's a lot of power.
Just make sure you have the engine to clean it up. You don't have to clean it up as soon as you do it, but make sure for the late game at least that you are cleaning up that nuclear, because even if you have the nuclear achievement, you're only gonna score 5 points. So all you need is 5 of them. That's basically this, right? All of these other spaces, they need to be clean.
Right.
Because otherwise you're missing out on
The
more,
ones, the
the
2s, the
ones
3s,
and the 3s.
Those
Yeah.
finance always feels like a I have to do finance.
Yeah.
Oh god. And you don't want to take 2. Because taking 2 for 1 action, meh.
Be generous, people.
3 or 4, like 3 is even like a, because
Yeah, I mean, in the games where you're strapped for money, everybody's gonna be strapped for money, because that obviously means the money cards haven't come out. Everybody's struggling for the spaces. Everybody's and already in this game, you always feel like you're not doing enough.
Yep.
You always feel like there's something choking at you. I'm like, I need to do more. I need to do more.
Wouldn't there be a couple of great buildings cards that could solve that problem? If only I knew of some buildings that could do that.
No, I'm saying in the case these buildings have not come out. I found that because, I mean, this is not a purely logical game. You're playing this game with people, and emotions are involved.
People are emotional, not logical. What? My mind is blown. My worldview has changed. No, it's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, be generous, and people will reciprocate. So give out the 2 money. People will probably give it back, and if they don't play with that guy anymore.
Or just don't and win the game, because if you have the good, I'm not gonna talk about the
We're just saying that those cards have not come out.
Right.
Those cards are way down. They're here. Forget about it.
Buy, sell oil. Great space early on.
Yeah, as you said.
Fine when it gets to 2, maybe 3.
No, 3 is bad.
3 is bad.
3 is bad. 3 is bad.
I think at that point you'd want to go old with them for sure. But yeah, otherwise, sure.
I think for me, even 2 is bad.
You think even 2 is bad?
Yeah.
I think 2 is fine.
2 is a building. 2 is a building. Choose a building for 4 points. What are 3 values of what gonna give you?
UN activations?
That's 4 points for 2,
yeah,
right?
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. It's not great. It's not great. It's not great. One is obviously better. That's why there's 2 rounds where it's 1.
Yeah.
So try to get those all out early. Trade. If you really have a lot of things and you need to get some other things, sure. But you're not getting things by going to that space.
I think trade is for that moment in the game where you say, this strategy I was trying to build on is failing.
Mm-hmm.
I need to shift into something else. Like
Right.
I need to shift my focus from commerce into industry. It's basically a space for players who are on the newer side probably of the game, players who are in the second, third, fourth time playing this game, and they just want to shift their play style. You can just go there and make sure that you're not.
That said, it is a fine space to go to if you are focusing primarily on yellow buildings, because many yellow buildings just give you stuff like plastic cubes or money, or usually money or plastic cubes, and maybe sometimes steel or other things as well. So if you have a primarily yellow strategy, that's a great space just to help convert things around. Buildings are the spaces are great. Absolutely.
Building will. I mean, I found it more often than not as like when games were too close, just buy buildings, even if you don't need them, even if they don't fit in your engine anywhere. Pick up a building. If you have the engine to clean it up, just pick up the highest scoring building and clean that up.
Yeah.
If you don't have engine to clean it up, look for the clean building and buy that.
They typically are 3 points. That's basically our piece. That's our piece of the game. So, final thoughts. Recognize the scoring categories, try to do well in them, and also focus on what other players are doing as well. That's always a key point, right?
Yeah.
If you see a player who is primarily working on green buildings, maybe pick up a green building at some point, like at the start of your turn, so that your guy is there. They have to spend a bit of extra energy. It's like, oh, get out of the way, and that's it. Things like that will work. Yeah,
compete for the spaces, but make sure you're in the right order to compete. I mean, you don't want to be second on the board if you're competing for the same markets.
Okay.
But generating it the right time is crucial.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's it for Energy Empires. Stay tuned for our next video, which is going to be about the top 10 things you can do to largely improve your Twilight Struggle game. And that video is going to be targeted not at people who are experienced in the game, but more about the people who are just picking it up, have read the rules a couple of times, and they want to know how to go from there. And before diving into the massive read that is Twilight Strategy, the Twilight Strategy PDF, there are a few key things that the Twilight Struggle master here, Sani Fakhoury, is going to teach you about.
Hello.
And if you have any suggestion, any game which you would like us to do one of these videos for, please leave a comment. We are more than happy.
That's a wrap, folks.
That's it.
Keep your environments clean and have a great day.
Subscribe.